Have you been wondering how to build a successful strategy with open source for your company? Or why would you invest in open source projects when you can use the code for free? Are you an open source maintainer on the edge of burnout? Or a newcomer who's too intimidated to take the first steps and get involved? Maybe you're not a code developer and you think that there's no place for you in the open source ecosystem. You're not alone. My name is Ildiko Vancha, and this is the My Open Source Experience podcast, where my guests and I share our open source journeys with all the successes, the struggles, and joyful moments. Find the answers to your questions and dilemmas, and more importantly, join us and be part of the community. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of the My Open Source Experience podcast. Today, we will talk about internships and mentorships in, mostly open source communities, but probably a little bit in general as well. And I have Engin Kayraklioglu with us as a guest today. And before we dive into the exciting topic of internships and mentorships in open source communities, Engin, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your background in tech and what do you do currently?
First of all, thanks for having me in your podcast. My name is Engin. So I'm a computer engineer. I'm interested in parallel programming in general, and maybe kind of a career goal is to make parallel programming more accessible to more people. And right now I'm a software engineer working on a couple of open source projects at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise.
Do you remember when you first learned about open source, the concept and open source projects?
Yes, actually I do. Maybe it goes all the way back to undergrad, like 14, 15 years ago, even. Like I was trying to help a research group in my school back in Turkey, and I was tasked to learn something about GCC. For those who doesn't know, GCC is one of the biggest compilers out there. It compiles C code, and like even though maybe I knew the term open source, at that moment it dawned on me that I can actually take a look at how it's implemented and how it works. So that was probably my first like real brush with open source, like looking at real production grade, huge open source application. Of course, I didn't understand much of it. I was just an undergrad back then. But it was probably my first real open source experience in terms of looking at open source code. And of course, I didn't contribute to GCC or anything like that, but right now I'm in open source.
So if I understand it correctly, you were looking into compilers and the GCC compiler specifically, and then you realized that it isn't just a compiler that is available to you to use, but it is also a compiler that you can kind of look under the hood and look into the box and figure out how it's put together.
Exactly. And that was huge. Like I can put a printf in the compiler and rebuild the compiler and compile my C code and see my printf coming out of compiler, which was a big thing for me back then.
Was that what was most exciting to you about the fact that it was open source, which meant that the source code was available, that you could tweak with it, and through that understanding better how it worked?
Yes, probably back then it was the case. Like I cannot say that I saw the whole community aspect of it. Like many people with many different backgrounds contributing to it. Some of them are on volunteer time and stuff like that. I don't think I saw that aspect of it. Now, probably I value that aspect of open source more than just code being available. But it wasn't visible to me back then.
Do you remember when you also started to learn about the community aspect of open source, that it's not just code randomly appearing on the internet, but that these communities are, as you say, some people are volunteers, some people are working in those communities as part of their jobs. So there are a lot of people from all around the world to work on these projects.
Yeah, so Back then, probably GitHub was out there, and I must have seen some projects on GitHub and some discussions and pull requests and whatnot. But probably uh, the actual understanding of the community aspect started with Chapel, the project that I'm working on right now. So coincidentally, I started working on Chapel towards the end of my undergrad. So I've been with this community for a long time now. Um, and that's when I understand, there were mailing lists back then, and sometimes there was GitHub discussion or GitHub issues rather. So I was able to see and make sense of how the development actually works. So probably that's the period where I get to understand, okay, this is not just about giving the code freely. It's more than that. It's just creating a community um, to develop a piece of software, essentially.
Getting involved in these open source communities is not a straightforward thing, and I think Chapel was your first project where you got involved. There was a My Open Source Experience podcast episode where we had Michael Dexter on the podcast, and he described this 5 stages of how people get involved most often in open source projects. So the first step is being a silent user. So like I think what you described with GCC probably belongs to this category that you like used the code, tweaked around with it, but you didn't really interact with the community. And then the second step is asking questions from the community, and then reporting a bug is a third step. And then the fourth step is when you do more contributions and become a contributor. And in his list, the fifth step is when you become a conference speaker and somewhat become an ambassador for the project that you're involved in as well. Do these 5 steps resonate with your journey with Chapel?
It resonates extremely well with me. I was for a very long time in that silent user category, which I would call a lurker even. Like I was reading all the GitHub issues, pull requests, trying to make sense out of them and things like that. But I don't think I had a single interaction, either like a comment under a GitHub issue or something like that for years with the Chapel community. So I definitely like I'm sure there are many people out there who are like me or who are like what I was like years ago. So I definitely understand the challenge. Looking back at those days, I don't like. I say I wish I was more active, but I don't blame myself for it. Like, it's difficult to make that initial step. Um, so those steps, I think, resonates perfectly with me. I think I completed my journey with the Chapel project in that journey. Like I'm at the final step right now. But yeah, I've been through all these steps. Some of them shorter periods of time, some of them longer periods of time.
Can you describe the Chapel project just in a nutshell, like what the project is about? And you said that you started working with it when you were an undergrad. So I'm also curious how you stumbled on the project at that time.
So Chapel is a programming language. It's a parallel programming language, as we want to qualify it, because concepts of parallelism are baked into the language itself. So if you have a multi-core laptop, let's say, and you want to benefit from the parallelism in your hardware, Chapel has all the features as a programming language in it for you to benefit from the multi-core systems. Of course, we don't leave it at multi-core. We are also focusing on supercomputers, which is the other end of the spectrum where you have to do trillions and trillions of calculations per second. So Chapel can work with anything on the spectrum of parallel computing. And going back to like how I ended up like in the Chapel community, I guess like I was interested in parallel computing, parallel programming, even in my undergrad. And if I do introspection, it was because I just like the professors who were teaching parallel programming, and that's how I got involved in parallel programming. Um, and then I did my last internship in undergrad in the United States, where I was working in an academic group. under Tarek El Ghazavi in George Washington University, who was my advisor, PhD advisor. So, anyways, I did an internship in his group, and he asked me to compare Chapel and UPC. So I was like, yes, I want to do that. And I have two questions. What is Chapel? What is UPC? So that's probably the time that internship during undergrad is when I first learned about Chapel and when I first used Chapel. This probably goes back to maybe 12 years or something like that. So ever since then, I have been on and off for a while in the Chapel community, but now I'm working on it full time basically.
Throughout your PhD program, did you have a chance to get in touch with the community at all, or you were still more in that user phase where you were maybe following it a bit more closely, what they were doing, but not really interacting with them that much yet?
Yeah, probably the latter. So I was definitely more involved in the project, but still as a silent user, with that classification from before. As I said, like I was looking at under the hood more. I was reading PRs more. Like, why did you put that code in there? Like, I'm trying to understand things, but I was still, I don't know what you want to call it. Like, I was maybe too shy, too introverted, whatever the right term is. But breaking that barrier was not easy for me, until I had another internship with the Chapel team. That kind of, something extra needed to happen for me to break that barrier, unfortunately. But that was my journey.
Do you remember how that experience was? I mean, like when you were looking at that PR and you were wondering why the person made the particular decision. Like, do you remember the barriers, like how it felt? Like, was it kind of fear of interacting with someone in public, or even just to figure out the process itself, how to reach out to someone? Do you remember what were these, like what the biggest challenges that just kept you from interacting, and like you had the urge but just wasn't quite reachable for you?
I don't think it was process. Like, things were on GitHub right back then, and it was like, you can just post a comment and, you know, people will see it. It's more on the social side of things. You can maybe like self-confidence. The fact that it being public is a challenge because, what if the question that I have on my mind is just absolutely ridiculous? So you don't want to like put a question like that. Like, you don't want that to be your first interaction with the community. So those kind of fears basically were something that I couldn't overcome, honestly. So it was really difficult for me. And I think one of the aspects of this is the fact that open source then and today still is like 90% written communication. So all you're seeing is just words and sentences without tone, and you don't even know, you know, how those people sound like, whether they would like you, like, those kind of things always play in your head, and you always, at least me, I always thought about, they won't like me, stuff like that. So, that was the the social aspect of it that was kind of scary to me.
If there was no internship program, if there was no opportunity for you to get into an internship program that led you to the community and interacting with the community, do you think there's anything you or rather the community could have done to help someone like you who had this urge to get involved and ask questions and get out there, but to help you overcome those fears and concerns that you had? So if there was no internship program, was there anything that they could have done for you to just, take that leap, take that step and get over your fears somehow for those, I don't know, the 30 seconds of finishing your email or text message and hit send?
Right? That's a very good question. I really don't know the answer to that. It's kind of hypothetical, but at the same time, that written communication aspect of things was huge to me, and still a little bit. Like, knowing faces and sounds like behind those nicknames and behind those words that I was seeing on screen is kind of the barrier breaker to me. Not necessarily a structured internship program, but like getting to know some of the community members in some conference or an event, and maybe not even that, maybe like an online communication, maybe just watching their talk and just seeing them as a person and not just words on my screen would probably make a big difference for me. And I think that's still an important thing for an open source community to put more human faces and sounds behind written words. I think that's still an important aspect.
So it sounds like that from your perspective, you're saying that communities, when they have the opportunity, they should utilize, like, speak at events and have those recorded talks accessible in their materials if they have a website, on their website or their GitHub page or wherever their materials are, and make sure that they do some more of these ambassador type of activities to make the community look and feel more approachable. And at the same time, I assume also people like you were back then, during the PhD program, who are looking into getting involved, maybe try to look at some of these talks and see if they can explore the community from the human and social aspect a little bit, even without being able to just walk up to someone and say hi just yet.
Definitely. I think both of them makes very strong sense to me.
You did an internship program, and part of that, you got involved in chapel. Can you tell a little bit about that internship program? Like, was that program organized by the community, or was that an internship program at a company, or some other official program, or how did that internship program become accessible to you?
Yeah, so that was back when the Chapel was mainly developed at Cray, which was a company that was later acquired by Hewlett Packard Enterprise. I'm at HP right now. So it was an internship program under Cray, and it was actually a funny thing, I believe. Like, I think I approached someone or I applied for the position, but it was already filled. But then someone pulled back, and then it reopened again. So it just happened kind of a little bit last minute, but it kind of led me to where I am right now. That's kind of crazy to think about. So that's how it all got started. So I was at Cray for 3 months or something like that.
As part of that internship program?
Yes, yes.
Do you remember how the program was structured? Can you tell a little bit about the program itself?
From company perspective, there isn't much specific to talk about. It was just a summer internship deal, right? We were a group of interns. Some of them are working on different projects, not necessarily all open source, obviously. So this is more about Cray's business. And I happened to be working with the Chapel team. I had a mentor, Michael Ferguson, who was a really helpful person. And again, as I said, like way and way ahead of me in terms of like technical capabilities and stuff like that. And one of those nicknames that was posting all the technically, complex comments on GitHub and stuff like that. But he was just right in front of me. And what was really like back then, everything was in person, of course. So it was for a week I worked with Michael in person, and then I was in Seattle working with the rest of the Chapel team in person. So that was kind of the structure that I had for 3 months, and it made day and night difference in my career, basically.
Do you remember if there was like a specific outcome that they defined for the internship program, or was it more targeted towards bringing more people into the community, and I assume the company as well?
I'm not sure if there was a single outcome expected out of it. Back then, this was during my PhD, and they knew that I wanted to work on Chapel or work with Chapel as part of my PhD. So they were like, the tasks that I was looking at are more like under the hood kind of tasks, so that I can understand the language's implementation a little bit. I implemented a couple of like bigger scale items that are still in use today, some of which is in Chapel compiler, for example. So it was more of a learning experience to me. And from the team's perspective back then, I got a couple of things out of their way that are not necessarily in the critical path for the project in their plans, but nice to have features, you know. So I believe that was kind of the setup there, not very strict program or not very strict outcomes expected at the end of the summer or anything like that.
You mentioned that you were working with people in person. Did that happen right away at the beginning of the internship program, or did that come a little bit later?
No, it was the whole process actually. But back then, and this is again before pandemic and everything, so everything is by default in person back then. Even back then, the Chapel team was somewhat distributed, and luckily my mentor Michael was in the same area as I was living. So I spent 1 week with him, like in an office, in a round table setting, just our laptops, and we are coding, and I can just turn to him and ask my questions. So it was like really kind of close or intimate mentor-mentee relationship. At least in the beginning of an internship, that was really key to me. Like it can kickstart a lot of things, right? Not even a cubicle. We are just in a table for a week, 9 to 5-ish. We can just communicate, right? So I'm sure I had like asked hundreds of questions to Michael back then, and he patiently answered them, and that got me started in my internship and probably my open source contributor journey in Chapel. I don't want to just say it was just Michael. Of course, that continued on when I moved to Seattle for the rest of my internship to work with the rest of the Chapel team in person. But still, like that was a really good and strong start for many things for me.
I mean, it sounds like that you kind of got a little bit of a once in a lifetime opportunity, because especially after the pandemic, doing things in person is a little bit harder, and most open source project internship programs that I'm aware of, it's still usually happening mostly online. So the fact that you were able to sit together with these people, I think it's amazing. Although I do know about University of California, Santa Cruz, Emily Lovell has a program, for example, where the interns aren't sitting together with the maintainers of the open source projects, but the interns are together for a big chunk of the program and sit themselves together and work on things together. So that is also something that is out there, which still helps people to overcome some of those fears and challenges that we also talked about earlier. So when you started your internship program and going and sitting down at that desk, do you remember if you still felt a little intimidated and scared, or the fact that you knew that you will be there with someone in person and be able to talk about the project that just took it all away?
I believe it's more the latter. I'm sure I was intimidated in the beginning, but I don't remember any of those moments. So it must have been a really short period for me to, okay, let's just work together. So it was a really like this is kind of ironic. Like I spent years in the community, kind of like as a silent user as the first step, and just that initial experience of maybe just hours of working together and communicating together, and that kind of lowered the barriers way more than all years of being a silent user, essentially. So that was how impactful it was to me.
You obviously had the opportunity to work with the chapel community more in person throughout the entire internship. But do you think if you only had like a few hours or a couple of days, that would still have been enough to be able to start participate in the community online?
I would like to say so. Maybe not by equal amount. I mean, this is all a spectrum, right? Like how much you open up and how much you contribute and how much you consider yourself to be part of the community. So, of course, being an intern and being intimately within the community for 3 months is different than just sitting together in a desk for a day. But at the same time, I think it's safe to say, or in retrospect, like maybe sitting at a desk for a day or two is like 90% of the road, in terms of like being completely integrated with the community, if you will. So you will have to spend some more time on your own, or it will take some more intimidation, maybe a little bit nervousness after that to lower the last 10% of the barrier. But still, I think it's not a linear progression, right? Like it's not like every day it's a little bit better. Just suddenly you just get the hang of it and you become part of the community, I think.
So is that how that felt for you since you were able to interact with people in person? You said that the team was a little bit distributed even back then, but it sounds like that once you had this in-person mentor-mentee relationship and sessions, it sounds like that you didn't really have any challenges afterwards to interact with the community in any format.
Not really. No, I think that initial barrier was a big thing for me. I don't think, like, of course, being in person always helps. Like we try to be in person even after that as a team, as a community. We try to, meet at conferences, have our own conferences and things like that. So being in person still helps after all these years. I cannot say that everything is 100% fine just online. But yeah, initial meetings, getting started on a project or getting started to know a community and things like that. I think there's still a lot of value to be gained for like short in-person times, even in my opinion.
In terms of your journey with Chapel, so you had a 3-month internship program and then that ended. After the internship program, you obviously stayed involved in Chapel. Was that through working for the company, Clay, who was supporting the project at the time?
So it was not through Cray, but as I mentioned, my PhD was using Chapel at least as a prototyping medium. So I have to go back to my PhD and finish it, which didn't happen for another 3 years. So in those 3 years, I still had to work with the Chapel software stack as my prototyping medium. And along the process, if I see an issue with the code, or if I can see an optimization opportunity or any opportunity to make things better, now I had very little issue with it. It's just if I have the time, like I can write the code. And obviously these are smaller changes than I could make during my internship, right? Like I cannot devote days for open source development, unfortunately, back then. But smaller changes, I could just make a branch and open a PR with not even a second thought, because it was like kind of day-to-day thing that I was doing during my internship, and I know very well. And if someone will pick it up as a reviewer, I would probably know them as well. That also helped. So yeah, I mean, during that period, I was always in the community, contributing in the discussions, attending conferences, and things like that as much as I can. So after that point, I was like not shy or silent at all, I think.
Was that important to you to stay involved in the community after the internship program ended? I mean, like obviously you were working with Chapel, as you mentioned in your PhD still afterward, but was it important to you that if like you saw a bug and had the bandwidth to fix it that you go and do that?
Yeah, I mean, it was beneficial and fun for me in many different ways. One, I want that bug to be gone, right? Like, and I know it very well. And if I have an idea on how to fix it, it's much better for me to just fix it and open the PR, right? Like instead of going to someone asking, trying to see if they have the time and stuff like that. I have the time, I have the interest, and I have the motivation for this to function correctly, or this to function that way. Um, so just getting it out of the way was beneficial for me, so that now it's in Chapel releases and I'm using Chapel release instead of my own fork of Chapel, right? So just saying that was important to me. And the other aspect of it is like my PhD was very like experimental, so I was writing a lot of code, but at the same time that code was just written one deadline to another deadline to another deadline just to submit papers, collect results and stuff like that. And just to use nice words with it, the code was not pretty to look at. At the same time, the code that I was writing for contribution to Chapel, it was more production grade, not necessarily, not like slapdash put together spaghetti code, but more like, okay, this needs to be tested, and I need to think about all the cases where these things can go haywire, and cover the code for that and stuff like that. So um, getting to that mentality every now and then kind of keeps you sharp as a developer in general too, because if year in and year out you just write bad code, and I did write my own share of bad code uh, during my dissertation times, it's not healthy for you as a developer. So I think those kind of contributions, writing code that will be, let's be honest, judged by others first and then used by others after, I think is a good skill and something that you have to keep doing with some frequency to keep you sharp, I think. So I benefited from that a lot too.
The fact that open source is developed by open collaborative communities, that was helpful to you in multiple ways, like you didn't need to maintain a local fork of the software, but you could go participate in the community and use the upstream version, and also to develop your skills as a programmer and to get better and more experienced and write better code because you were working on that code with a group of people who were not working for the same organization as you were. You were all part of an open source community, so everyone was really focusing on the quality of the code that was contributed to the project.
Right, definitely. It feels like a complete different skill set that you need to keep sharp.
There are all these benefits that we are listing about open source, both that the source code is available as well as having the communities and you can work with them and learn a lot and help advance the project upstream. So there are these aspects of open source and they're very appealing. However, do you think that if you did not have access to the internship program, like if that spot didn't open back up that you said that was unavailable for a moment and then you had the opportunity to apply again, to grab it when it opened up again, do you think you still would have gotten to the point of getting involved in the project, or likely would have taken a different trajectory to your career?
I can't confidently say that I would be at this position within the community if it wasn't for that internship, honestly. Like it's too hypothetical, of course. Maybe it would have, but it like in such a short period of time, it opened so many doors for me. And those doors are not like technical capability, it's more about social aspects of things. So it was a huge opportunity for me. And I can imagine my career taking a different path if it wasn't for that internship. And maybe even rest of my PhD, I would be maybe still a silent user for a decade and not really able to like contribute code, or if I have a question, not find the courage to ask them. I can imagine things going both ways, honestly. So I cannot underplay the role of that internship.
The ability to be able to participate in an open source project, how do you think that made a difference for you in your professional and your personal life?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, like, I really enjoy my job today, and sometimes you do introspection and like, what aspect of my job is I enjoy? Of course, not everything that I do, not everything in my responsibilities is as enjoyable as the others, right? So, like, what are the moments that kind of keeps me motivated? And I think that all comes down to interaction with the users, with Chapel users and Chapel contributors and the Chapel community at large, I think. So I think um, that aspect of my day-to-day is really important to me. And honestly, like, I can imagine like there are a bunch of code out there that is not open source, right? There's a lot of proprietary software. I understand the reason why some software needs to be proprietary and whatnot, but at the same time, these kind of positive vibes that I'm getting as being part of the community. I think that's only possible feasibly through open source. So I really enjoy that aspect of what I am doing, not just source being available, but these interactions in the community, maybe just finding or seeing new members who are shy, just like I was a decade ago, more than a decade ago, and trying to just be more welcoming and open to them and things like that, or all these kind of different interactions, users and community members. I think that's really a big motivator for me.
I know people who were interns in a mentorship program before and then became mentors themselves. And I think you are one of these people.
Right. So after my internship, Chapel participated in programs like Google Summer of Code. And in fact, I'm wearing a Google Summer of Code t-shirt right now. It's from 2017, I believe, the year after my internship. Um, so yeah, for those who doesn't know, Google Summer of Code was, and probably still is, we aren't participating in it for a couple of years, but it's like a project or a wider community event where open source projects and open source contributors get together and they contribute to open source projects and whatnot. So Chapel participated in that for several years in the past, and I was mentor in all of them, I think. And the first one occurred right after my internship. So the year after my internship, the next summer, I was mentoring someone else through Google Summer of Code. And it was a really great experience for me. And I think that's when I really got into, code reviews in detail or code reviews for like thousands of lines of code where things are really complicated and tangled and things like that.
What inspired you to become a mentor? Like especially soon-ish after your internship ended.
I think I always like personally enjoyed teaching, but more like one-on-one or like small group teaching, like more interactive teaching rather than lecturing. Um, so that definitely is a motivator for me, was a motivator for me back then. And another aspect of it is kind of pay it forward, right? Like people were so welcoming to me, and I was feeling that it was a big step for me. And now 10 years after that, I can see that yes, it was. So if I can take small part in a story like that for someone else, I think that that would be a huge kind of, I don't know, it's more philosophical or romantic or whatever you want to call it, but that aspect of it is kind of was important to me and still is today.
Do you remember your like the first experience of being a mentor? Did you have people to chat about how to be a mentor, or did you have well-baked ideas going into the mentorship program, what you're going to do and what your goals are as a mentor, how you're going to approach it?
It was more random than anything else, I think. We had like mentors who are serving under chapel just get together and talk to each other and exchange ideas, and that was really helpful for me to understand from those who are more experienced in mentoring younger folks essentially. So it was a really good learning experience for me. There was a lot of like challenges in terms of how much time I should spend on mentoring because the student that I was mentoring was super bright and was coming up with tons of questions that are not like read this link. It's like, okay, now I have to stop what I'm doing and I have to understand what you're asking because this is a good question. So it was really like enticing to me to spend more time with him because it was really good puzzles that he was coming up with. But then you have to draw the line somewhere, right? Because you have your day job too and things like that. So that's a bit of a challenge with mentorship. It's easy to get lost in it a little bit, which is fun, but at the same time, you have to balance your responsibilities. And I started to realize that in my first experience with mentorship, real mentorship.
You are a contributor and now a maintainer leader in the chapel project, and you also have your day job. So I wonder if the experience of being a mentor in Google Summer of Code for years, like, did it change your approach to the community and how you interact with people, or also like how you interact with either new employees at your company, or just colleagues and your team?
Definitely. I think this happens gradually, and you only realize that after a point. But like, I think it's very valuable to see, what kind of challenges newcomers to the community face and what kind of mistakes they make too, right? So, and there's both social and technical aspects of it. Like both social aspects is clear, right? Like you have to be, again, I keep saying that, but you have to be welcoming and understanding the challenges that they are facing. And some of these folks are just volunteering their own personal time to contribute to your project. So you really have to put that into perspective. And the technical aspects of it too, like if they are facing some technical challenges, if they are having some mistakes, but like why did they have that mistake? Like, is the thing that we have not intuitive enough for them to think that that would work? Like, I think these kind of interactions, not necessarily mentor-mentee relationship, but like new user, for example, you are giving a tutorial on the language, not necessarily mentor-mentee kind of a relationship, but similar. Seeing these kind of challenges and mistakes teaches you a lot as someone more senior within the community. Like, uh, it's a really good perspective to have, and you really have to go out and meet new members of the community and see how they are using the product that they are, uh, or the solution or the open source thing that you're working on.
So it sounds like that being a mentor encouraged you to look for things to improve in the project and just help people having a better onboarding and first time experience with the project, whether they are new contributors or new users, and like look for these opportunities to help their journey, and through that, having a growing or steady, stable environment and ecosystem around Chapel.
Absolutely. I think these kind of ecosystems, as you put it, kind of develop organically a little bit. Like you cannot design everything from scratch without having any community members. So you maybe lack workflows, you maybe lack documentation, but then those lacks are kind of closed as you gain more and more members. So that organic development, you just have to roll with or adapt to or be open to at least.
Before we depart, Engin, can you please tell us something about yourself that has nothing to do with programming languages, open source, maybe mentoring, some kind of a hobby or a fun fact that you don't mind sharing?
I really like mountain biking, and these days I'm trying to carve up more and more time in my week to do that more. So I really enjoy being in the nature and just a little touch of adrenaline, not crazy stuff, but yeah, I really enjoy mountain biking.
So you're doing like those crazy trails and just shooting down the mountain and all that stuff that looks dangerous?
No, I just a sprinkle of adrenaline. I
Oh,
don't
okay.
drink it from a
Okay.
bottle. So it's just like going fast in a forest. That's it. If I have to jump, I'll probably just get off the bike and just walk it. But yeah.
Is this something that you do by yourself, or you have like a group of people who you're going out to do mountain biking with?
For now, it has been by myself in the last couple of months because I just moved actually. I was in San Francisco, now I moved to Florida, so my social circle is just growing these days, and I haven't come to a point where I can have like a mountain biking gang or something. So right now it's more of a solitary event, which I actually enjoy too.
I mean, could be something to build a community around, or look for existing communities if there are any in your area. And yeah, I'm sure that your open source experience will help a lot
Exactly.
in that.
I need to find a mentor for mountain biking to teach me all the tricks.
There you go. I mean, I uh, I don't do mountain biking, and the closest I can compare is skiing, which I tried to learn when I was 32 or 33, way too late in life, to start learning something like that. But I can definitely say that the half day course or something, or maybe even full day course on actually how to try to ski, definitely very helpful, because if I tried to do all that by myself, I'm not sure if I would have been able to get down the hill to start with, and that
Right.
would have been able to get down the hill with all my bones intact, which sounds like mountain biking can be similar.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. I think you learn all the things in the wrong way, and then if you do that, then you're stuck in that wrong, bad position. So mentorship matters.
Yeah, there you go. I love that. And with that, that's all, folks. That was our episode for today. What did resonate with you the most? What new ideas, strategy, or useful tips did you hear today? Or you have a comment or follow up question to ask? Comment on the episode below, or start a conversation on your favorite social media platform. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast so others can discover it too. And stay tuned, because the next episode is just around the corner.